As the clock runs out on the deadline set by Donald Trump for Iran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, the world stands at a critical crossroads. What began as a military confrontation has rapidly evolved into a high-stakes geopolitical and economic crisis, with global energy markets, international law, and regional stability all hanging in the balance. Is this a calculated pressure strategy designed to force Tehran back to the negotiating table, or a prelude to a devastating escalation targeting Iran's infrastructure? And how are global powers, from Europe to Asia, preparing for the consequences of a potential rupture in one of the world's most vital energy arteries? As the deadline expires, is this a calculated move for the forced diplomacy through pressure, or a dangerous threshold that risks triggering a wider regional war? And as allies grow uneasy and adversaries stand firm, are we witnessing a decisive moment or the beginning of something far more unpredictable? Let us continue our special coverage.
The United States military began major combat operations in Iran.
קרא משטר הרשע באיראן, מוות לישראל, מוות לאמריקה.
A report by Axios highlights that as of April 7, 2026, President Trump faces a decisive moment in the Iran crisis. Either proceed with large-scale military strikes or allow diplomacy more time. He has threatened to target key Iranian infrastructure, including bridges and power plants, if Tehran fails to meet his deadline to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. Such strikes could have severe civilian consequences and risk triggering wider regional retaliation. Despite the rhetoric, internal divisions remain within the United States administration, with senior officials reportedly favoring continued negotiations. Iran has submitted proposals, but Trump has dismissed them as insufficient, leaving the situation balanced between escalation and a last-minute diplomatic breakthrough. European leaders especially targeting civilian infrastructure. According to recent reporting, Antonio Costa cautioned that any U.S. strike on Iranian power stations would be illegal under international law, emphasizing that such facilities are civilian in nature and protected. Costa stressed that the crisis in the Strait of Hormuz cannot be resolved militarily and called for an urgent diplomatic solution to avoid wider regional war. The warning reflects growing European concern that U.S. threats, especially against infrastructure risk, violating legal norms, and further destabilizing global energy markets already under severe strain. With the expiration of the ultimatum given by President Donald Trump to Iran, the crisis has entered what many describe as its most dangerous phase yet. Washington has signaled readiness to strike critical infrastructure, while Tehran continues to resist under mounting military and economic pressure. At the same time, divisions are widening internationally. Europe is bracing for energy shocks. Global markets are reacting nervously, and questions are intensifying over the legality and consequences of targeting civilian infrastructure. To unpack the strategic, political, and global implications of this moment, we're joined by two distinguished voices: David K. Johnston, professor of Rochester Institute of Technology, New York, and Asma Abbas, editor-in-chief Denmark 24, joining us from Copenhagen. Welcome, a very warm welcome to both our distinguished guests. And we start off with Professor Johnston. With the deadline, sir, now expired, how do you interpret this moment? Are we at the brink of immediate escalation?
You never know what Donald is going to do. I mean, I've written about him and known him for almost 40 years, and he's very mercurial. So he often chickens out on actions, and sometimes he impulsively moves ahead. So it's not at all clear. What is clear is that the Iranians are in control here, not Trump. The Iranians are fighting the war they want to fight, not the war that Donald Trump expects them to fight. And they're in a position to defend their country and harry their neighbors in a way that the only way the U.S. could put a stop to that would be with a massive army under what was called the Powell Doctrine, 300 to 500,000 troops in a land invasion with a lot of casualties, whereas Trump has nowhere near the necessary assets to do that. All he can do is bomb and use missiles. He certainly can go after infrastructure, which could be a war crime. And if the American military attacks the only nuclear electric generating station in Iran, which was built by the Russians in the 1970s, that would be a war crime. But Trump doesn't care about anything like that. It's meaningless to him because he has no underlying philosophy. He has no deep knowledge of the region. So who knows what's going to happen? The deadline, as I understood it, was 8 p.m. this evening, which is about 14 hours from now.
Yes, sir, it is. Ms. Abbas, is this ultimatum consistent with President Donald Trump's past negotiation tactics, or does it represent a fundamental shift? What's your take? Ms. Abbas, can you hear me? Is this ultimatum consistent with President Donald Trump's past negotiation tactics, or does it represent a fundamental shift?
Hello, everyone, and thank you for having me. It doesn't sound like it's just a tactical or just a tactical plan by President Trump, because President Trump has publicly decided on the deadline, which is today night, today evening, at least Middle East and Iran time. But we have also to remember that before that, there is a session for the UN today that would be probably 10 hours, 8 to 10 hours before the deadline that President Donald Trump specified to and gave to Iran. If something would happen, this session would be a reason for that. Like it could give an excuse to any of this would happen, because both parties had publicly announced that they refuse. Like when Trump spoke about the deadline, Iran also refused this publicly, and neither side wants now to appear weak. So we have to wait and see what would happen before the deadline, especially that this is the 24-hour extension, because President Donald Trump didn't see any indicators, nor also via probably the mediations, that Iran would stop this war under this threatens, and Iran also threats back what Donald Trump has said about destructing the Iranian infrastructure. Iran also said that they would they would also destroy and attack the American bases in the region. So it doesn't seem to be going like the situation is going for de-escalation tonight.
Professor Johnston, considering you said that Trump is unpredictable and we have to wait and see what goes on, how credible is the threat of a large-scale strike on Iran's infrastructure within hours?
Well, Rana, the U.S. military is more than capable of taking out electric generating stations across Iran. Iran has a series of separate grids or largely separate grids. So it's not like the United States, where we have a handful of very large grids that go across many states. Taking down the grid in Iran could be put back up very quickly, and the IRGC is certainly going to see to it that it has electricity one way or another, whether it's from little diesel operations or rebuilding something that's been under attack. The big concern would be bombing the, I believe it's pronounced Bashir plant that is on the Persian Gulf. That's the nuclear power plant, because attacking that runs the risk of sending radioactive material, depending on where the wind is blowing, in a whole bunch of different directions. That would be the principal concern. And also, the studies of aerial bombing from World War II and the Vietnam War show that bombing is not effective. It increases the resolve of people to resist the aggressor. And while it kills many people, without question, and as we've seen in this war, many school children.
Sir, when you
others,
say killing many people killed is very much accountable in this situation at this point.
I'm sorry, say it again about accountable.
I said that when you mentioned the killing of many people, this is very much considered and it is taken into consideration, sir. It is a catastrophe if it happens.
Absolutely. This is an unnecessary war. It was started in violation of the American Constitution and Trump's oath of office. It should be stopped by Congress, but unfortunately, the leaders in Congress are members of Trump's own party, and they have given up all of their constitutional duties to him. We live in America today under a dictatorship. It is not a fully consolidated dictatorship, but Trump himself has described himself in dictatorial terms, and I've been warning people since 2011 that if Trump got to the White House, we would be in a dictatorship. But Donald doesn't care about the butcher's bill. Donald has no empathy for anyone. It is a central part of his nature that he has no regard for anyone else or for their lives. All of this is about his vainglorious ego, his belief that he is special. As he said last year, I run the country and the whole world. And so,
okay, sir, at this point, the impact of this war that's going on now on the whole world that he thinks that he is running, where are we going globally?
Well, probably this is not good for the U.S. and it may be very good for Europe. The Iranians have offered Europeans a deal. Don't cooperate in any way with the U.S. Don't let airplanes from the U.S. military land or overfly your country, and we'll let your oil ships out for a fee, which you will pay us in euros. That would degrade the position of the U.S. dollar as the world reserve currency, which is a huge subsidy to the United States. This may create an opportunity for Turkey to expand its influence, which Erdogan would very much like to do. It is a beneficial war to Putin because we've lifted the restraints on the sale of oil, and he's bringing in a lot of desperately needed revenue. And so, by the way, are the Iranians, perhaps as much as $14 billion, because oil that was in transit was no longer constrained by the sanctions the U.S. had put in place. So the likely long-term result of this war is less influence for the United States, more independence in Europe from the United States, both militarily and economically, stronger ties between Tehran and Moscow, which for 1,000 years were enemies, and horrible damage to the economies of the other Middle East countries that have Sunni rather than Shia leaders.
True, sir. Ms. Abbas, are we witnessing coercive diplomacy or the early stages of total war doctrine?
This is we're not sure yet because, well, if we speak, for example, about the mediations about Europe, they are trying somehow to push for diplomatic solutions. But here, when we speak about the U.S. and Iran, we are speaking about a long history of conflict, and there's no real negotiations at the moment. So even the mediations are still, well, at least the results are still so weak. So there's no evidence so far that these diplomatic efforts is working. And either also from, for example, Qatar or Oman, who's also in direct or indirect negotiations, or at least a dialogue with Iran. Um, so you know, and probably everyone knows that Europe doesn't want this war, and they, well, publicly they support US politically, but they don't want to be involved in this war, and they also consider the global economic expanding the war to the region, and also the refugees also, for example, like a new refugee crisis. So Europe do not want this war to expand, and they want to end this war, but they are not in a strong position that enable them to push for real diplomatic solutions, at least at this moment. Well, probably the economic pressure, the global economic pressure, the global economy circumstances would put some pressure on, especially on Trump, because he's the one who started the war, and he has to take action to open the Strait of Hormuz, while Iran still controlling the strait. And as your esteemed guest also mentioned, that Iran is offering deals for Europe, you know, to at least stop supporting the states and look to the other side, to the east, instead of looking to the west, to the US.
Professor Justin, what would a one-night strike realistically look like in operation terms? Could such an attack achieve its objective without triggering a wider regional war, sir? And
Well,
the impact of Trump's ultimatum on the GCC countries at this very crucial time?
Well, on the first part of that, I think without question, the U.S. military is capable of bombing, using missiles to take out any kind of infrastructure it wants to take out. The dominance of the U.S. military, which spends each year what something like the next 17 countries combined spend, I think should be unquestioned here. But remember, this is asymmetric warfare. This is not the war that the Iranians are fighting. They have their own way of going at it, which goes to your second point. The Iranians clearly have the capacity and the military doctrines and order to be able to harry all of the other countries in the Middle East to attack American bases in the Middle East. So the Saudis, the Bahrainis, et cetera, are at risk, not of anything that would bring their governments down, but that would certainly instill fear, damage their economies, reduce Middle East tourism, which is becoming a very big business. And it's important to recognize that Trump himself is not listening to military advisors. He doesn't care what they think because he believes he knows so much. He knows so little that he said the other day that with one step, you can go from Iran into Qatar. Just a second. That's all it takes. That should tell people about the appalling ignorance of Donald Trump, something I've been documenting for the last 38 years.
Sir, I just want to refer here to the impact and leverage that Iran has over the Strait of Hormuz, which wouldn't make things easier or more facilitated for the United States if the ultimatum is reached and Trump decides to do what he intends to do, and as you said, he's unpredictable, so no idea what's going to be happening at that point. But there is leverage. They do have Iranians do have leverage at this point, which is 2 points: the GCC countries and the Strait of Hormuz.
Yes, absolutely. And what's changed here is 5 weeks ago, the Strait of Hormuz was open. Now it's been turned into a money-making toll gate for the Iranians. And unless the Iranian regime is removed, and I don't see that as being at all likely, it certainly will not happen with the level of troops that are in the area now, then they will continue to profit off this, direct who can get oil and liquefied natural gas. And this will redound to the benefit of the Tehran regime, which needs, of course, foreign earnings. Its economy is a shambles, and it needs foreign earnings from oil, liquefied natural gas, and toll receipts at the Strait of Hormuz.
Got your point. Very appreciated, sir. Ms. Abbas, from a European perspective, how alarming are these developments strategically and economically?
Excuse me, I'm sorry, I barely can hear you.
I'll say the question. I'll say it. Ms. Abbas, from a European perspective, how alarming are these developments strategically and economically?
Well, Europe's starting to suffer instantly from the situation in the Middle East, and as I mentioned before, they do not want this war to expand. Although they support, loudly they support, publicly they support the U.S., but they still believe that this war has to come to an end very soon because it started to affect the citizens' everyday life in terms of the fuel, expenses and high prices. And we have read also in the news a few days ago about some airports in Italy had to cancel flights because of the lack of the kerosene. So it's becoming serious for Europe every day. So from the European perspective, they are pushing toward a diplomatic solution or open to, or at least to a ceasefire, while Iran is refusing a temporary ceasefire and they want to go to end of this war without appearing weak. For example, when just shut down an American Air Force. And at this point, by the way, where Trump just shifted this Iranian success from Iranian perspective to an American success, and in terms of saving the pilot, the American pilot. So this war is not only a military war but also information war, and Europe is standing in the middle between the Middle East and the U.S. They can't do so much about it, but they can push towards the diplomatic solutions using the economic situation and global economic crisis, possible crisis, as a tool, as a pressure tool to the U.S. at least.
Thank you very much. Got your point. Professor Justin, which scenario is more likely now? A limited strike, full escalation, or a last-minute deal, sir? And if you choose a last-minute deal, when and how, when the countdown has already started?
Well, the Iranians have made it pretty clear that they are not interested in negotiating now. There's always back-channel communications going on between adversaries, so we don't know what might be going on. But the Iranians don't have to be offered something that's useful to them. They can certainly take a lot of pounding punishment from the air and continue the way that they're going. Trump is under, as your other guest pointed out, pressure from European countries to knock this off. Unfortunately, because he believes he is this special person who should run the whole world and nobody else knows anything. We're all idiots. He's said that many times. Anyone who disagrees with him is an idiot. He's going to follow whatever the council is in his own head at the moment. And the key thing, is he does not have enough troops. You would need 300,000 to 500,000 troops for a land invasion, and invading Iran would be as difficult as invading Afghanistan was. It's a very difficult territory for a land invasion. So I don't think any of us can reasonably predict what's going to happen. What we know for certainty is Donald is suffering from something called frontal lobe dementia. A number of medical experts have pointed this out.
We've heard this a lot, sir, but we have no confirmation, of course.
Well, frankly, many of the people who are doctors in this field have said you, from public observation of him, can diagnose his condition. And I think that is correct based on the medical literature that I've looked at. But combine that with the fact that he is just unbelievably, appallingly ignorant. It's one of the first things I learned about Donald. The 3 best-selling books I've written about him go into this. He gets ideas in his head, and you can't talk him out of them. Now, he is running into some resistance from the U.S. military. In the United States, military officers take an oath to follow the Constitution. They do not take an oath to follow the orders of the president. And we've seen that Trump has been purging the military, particularly of American generals and admirals who are black or are female. And as I've warned people now for about 15 years, the classic sign that you're replacing a democracy with a dictatorship is removing officers who are loyal to the Constitution, loyal to the government, and replacing them with toadies who will do whatever a great leader wants. And this is part of what Trump is trying to do to consolidate his power. And by the way, on the point your other guest made, we're seeing lots of economic damage in the U.S. The price of fertilizer, it's planting time, has gone through the roof. Gasoline is selling at more than twice the price Trump promised it would be today if he got into office. He said $2 a gallon. It's over $4, in some places as high as $5.50 or $6. We're seeing shortages in this country, and we're seeing businesses hold back on investment. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development says that small and medium-sized businesses are having an extraordinarily difficult time raising money, either through loans or investments, because of the uncertainty created by this needless, unconstitutional, and illegal American war on Iran.
Ms. Abbas, are we seeing a shift in Europe's trust towards the U.S. crisis management?
As I mentioned before, Europe is not the strongest party, not in this war, not in the NATO, not in the trade agreement between the EU and the US. So Europe has not so much to do at the moment, but to push toward the diplomatic talks between the U.S. and Iran.
Ms. Abbas, sorry to interrupt you
time,
at this point, but do you think that the Europeans do not want to be involved because this is what actually Trump said?
The Europeans do not want to be involved because they have fear of having, for example, or first of all, a larger economic crisis in terms of the global fuel and energy prices, and then like Europe also fears a new refugee crisis from Iran, and most importantly, they don't want to be targeted by the Iranian military system. So Europe does not want in any way to be involved in this war, despite they said, like for example, the French President Emmanuel Macron, he mentioned many times so far that some European countries can contribute to supervise or to have some defense tasks in Strait of Hormuz, but that wouldn't be before this war ends. But under the current military activities, Europe do not want at all to be involved in this war for the three reasons and main reasons I just mentioned.
Professor Johnston, what are the domestic political calculations behind this escalation in Washington? And what does this crisis reveal about the future of U.S. foreign policy and global conflict management?
Well, Donald Trump ran for office promising that inflation would fall away to nothing, prices would drop. Both of those are going in the opposite direction. It's pretty clear at this point that unless Trump interferes in the elections, that the Democrats will gain control of the House. They might gain control of the Senate in the November elections. If that happens, they will tie Donald up 6 ways to heaven with investigations into the conduct of his presidency, prosecution of people who've committed no crimes, various other things to harry the American people who will not submit to Donald's dictatorial demands. I mean, Donald says, I have an Article 2, referring to the U.S. Constitution, that says I can do anything I want. It says nothing of the sort. But he sincerely believes he is entitled to be a dictator and we must do what he says. This is not going over well with the American people. His approval rating is down in the neighborhood of 1/3 of the public. And every day there are additional people from the base of his movement, the MAGA, Make America Great movement, although I and others read it as Make America a White Supremacist Society. People are breaking away from that. And remember, Trump ran for office explicitly saying, if you elect the other person, they're going to get in a war in Iran. But if you elect me, we're going to get in a war in Iran. And look where we are now.
True, Mr. Johnston, Professor Johnston, he promised to be a man of peace and he promised to end the Ukrainian war, Russia-Ukrainian war in 24 hours. He made a lot of promises during his campaign and finally we are here today. Ms. Abbas, is there still a realistic diplomatic off-ramp at this stage?
Well, probably, but nothing is said publicly. We know that the EU has some open channels as mediations. We know that Qatar and Oman also is having discussions with Iran, but still, apparently they are still weak because both parties are publicly rejecting each other's warnings, deadlines. The reactions are also tough, so from both parties. So it doesn't sound to be like the diplomatic efforts are still weak in my point of view until the moment. And as I mentioned before, probably like the global economy could be a pressure tool to use with Donald Trump, probably with Iran as well, because although Iran said that they are prepared for a long war, but at the same time, they also supply other groups in the Middle East, like in Iran, Lebanon, etc. So we're not sure that how long Iran could do that. So at some point, one of the parties has to stop for a moment and reevaluate their abilities in order to continue and expand this war, or to stop at some point and go for probably negotiations, whether about the war itself and the reasons of
So
it,
do you think,
the
Ms.
nuclear
Abbas,
weapon,
that
the
the
Strait of
ultimatum
Hormuz.
today will end up with a negotiation?
I'm sorry.
Do you think,
sorry?
or are you optimistic that the ultimatum that Donald Trump gave, that is in a few hours, is going to end with negotiations?
Not until this moment, to be honest, because Donald Trump was very strict in his deadline and he threatened Iran with destroying the infrastructure, with the like important infrastructures. So it will be really weird if he goes at like today and says we will go for negotiations, unless Iran actually represents something. unless Iran gave him a reason to do so. And until now, it doesn't appear to be like that.
Mr.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Okay, Mr. David Justin, your final words, please.
Well, I think Donald has painted himself into a corner. He doesn't know how to get out of this. His appalling ignorance about every aspect of this, militarily, culturally, economically, is a terrible problem. At the same time, he's under pressure from his own base. You promised no wars. What's going on here? So he's got himself in quite a pickle. And the Iranians are going to continue to fight the war they want to fight to defend themselves. I don't see any prospect of a land invasion. So the Iranian regime, with different leaders for sure, is likely to endure. And all of this goes back to the horrible decision of the US, British, and French governments in the early 1950s to overthrow the Mossadegh regime, put in place the awful dictator Shah Reza Pahlavi, and we're seeing the fruits of a bad decision from 75 years ago. This will continue.
Okay, this will continue with your final words. Thank you very much, David K. Justin in New York and Asma Abbas in Copenhagen for their valuable insights, our distinguished guests at this very critical moment, and of course your informative knowledge and in-depth analysis. I really appreciate, and as it moves remain uncertain, the world watches closely, aware that the decisions taken in the coming hours may reshape not only the region but the global order itself. And now, for the latest updates and breaking developments, we turn over to our colleague, my dear colleague, Basant Shahata, in the newsroom. Basant?
Thank you, Rana. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our top stories, where we bring you the latest news and developments from around the world. President Donald Trump says Iran could be, in his words, taken out in one night if it does not reopen the Strait of Hormuz by Tuesday night. Speaking at the White House, Trump said his Tuesday deadline for Iran to comply is final and suggested major U.S. military action could begin as early as Tuesday evening. The threat comes as Washington increases pressure on Tehran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz and accept U.S. terms, while Iranian officials continue to reject the American proposal. The remarks mark one of Trump's sharpest warnings yet as the war enters a more dangerous phase. U.S. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth has warned that Iran might see the most intense wave of strikes since the beginning of U.S. operations. He signaled further escalation ahead, stressing that Tehran faces a decisive choice. Hegseth underscored that U.S. President Donald Trump is firm in his approach, warning that Washington is prepared to act decisively if its demands are not met. Iran has signaled it seeks a definitive end to its conflict with the United States and Israel, resisting calls to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. According to Iran's official IRNA agency, Tehran rejected a U.S.-backed ceasefire proposal delivered via Pakistan, insisting instead on a comprehensive resolution. The response reportedly outlines 10 conditions, including halting regional conflicts, ensuring secure navigation through the Hormuz, lifting sanctions, and committing to post-war reconstruction efforts. Meanwhile, Axios reported that 4 U.S., Israeli, and regional sources with knowledge of the talks said that the U.S., Iran, and a group of regional mediators are discussing the terms for a potential 45-day ceasefire that could lead to a permanent end to the war. The spokesperson for the Khatam al-Anbiya Central Headquarters, Ibrahim Zulfaqari, has dismissed the rhetoric of U.S. President Donald Trump as hostile and unfounded, stating that such threats cannot offset what he described as Washington's loss of credibility and standing in the region. In remarks aired on state television, he portrayed the U.S. position as reflective of weakness rather than strength, emphasizing that escalating language would not alter realities on the ground or restore American influence. That's all for today. Don't forget to follow Qnews on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at Qnews AGY to stay informed. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for more updates on Qnews.